The auction house smelled of fear and broken dreams. Stood in the line of females, her silver skin glowing faintly under the harsh lights of the slave market. She kept her 4 eyes fixed on the ground, counting the cracks in the metal floor. Around her, other females whispered and cried, but had no tears left. She had spent them all years ago. The empire stretched across 40 star systems, and their society valued one thing above all else: reproduction. A female who could not bear children was considered worthless, a broken thing to be discarded like garbage. Had learned this truth when she was barely an adult, when the healers examined her and found that her womb would never quicken with life. Her family had been the first to abandon her. Her father, a respected military commander, could not bear the shame of having a barren daughter. Her mother wept but did nothing to stop him when he threw out of their home. Her betrothed, a young officer with political ambitions, broke their engagement within hours of learning the news. He spat in her face and called her a defective thing. That was 10 years ago. Since then, had survived on the edges of society, taking whatever work she could find. She cleaned waste disposal units. She scrubbed the floors of entertainment houses. She ate from garbage bins when times were hard. Through it all, she held onto her dignity, even as her people stripped away everything else. But dignity could not protect her from the debt collectors. When the factory where she worked shut down, could not pay her living pod rental. The landlord sold her debt to the government, and the government sold her to the slave markets. It was legal under law. A barren female had no rights, no protection, no value except what her body could fetch at auction. The auctioneer, a fat male with golden rings on all 6 of his fingers, walked down the line of slaves. He examined each female carefully, checking their teeth, feeling their muscles, asking about their fertility status. When he reached, he sneered. "This one is barren," he announced loudly, reading from the data pad in his hand. "By 3 separate medical examinations, no breeding potential whatsoever." Laughter rippled through the crowd of buyers, felt their contempt like physical blows, but she refused to flinch. She stood straight and kept her eyes forward. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her pain. "She's only good for labor," the auctioneer continued. "Strong enough for mining work or factory service. We'll start the bidding at 50 credits. 50 credits. That was the price of a meal at a decent restaurant. That was what her life was worth to these people. Felt something cold settle in her chest, a numbness that spread through her body like ice water. A few hands went up in the crowd. The bidding crept slowly upward, reaching 100 credits, then 150. The buyers were not enthusiastic. A barren slave was a poor investment, useful only for hard labor until her body gave out. 200 credits, someone called out. The auctioneer nodded and looked around for more bids. The crowd had grown quiet, losing interest in this unremarkable sale. Would go to whoever wanted a cheap worker for their mining operation or waste processing plant. She would work until she died, alone and unmourned. 5,000 credits. The voice cut through the silence like a blade. Every head in the auction house turned toward the speaker, looked up for the first time since the bidding began, and her breath caught in her throat. The bidder was human. She had heard stories about the humans, of course. Everyone in the galaxy had heard stories about them. They came from a small blue planet on the edge of the Orion Arm, a world that had been unknown to the rest of the galaxy until just 30 years ago. In that short time, they had exploded onto the galactic scene with a force that no one had anticipated. Humans were strange creatures. They were soft and fragile compared to most species, with no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. They were short, their senses mediocre, their physical strength unremarkable. By all logical measures, they should have been a footnote in galactic history, a minor species destined for obscurity or extinction. Instead, they had become one of the most feared and respected species in known space. The human who had bid on stood near the back of the crowd. He was tall for his kind, with broad shoulders and a face marked by scars. His skin was dark brown, and his eyes were a startling shade of amber that seemed to glow in the dim light of the auction house. He wore the uniform of the Earth Alliance military, the organization that had fought the Empire to a standstill in the border wars. "Did you say 5,000 credits?" the auctioneer asked, his voice squeaking with surprise. "You heard me correctly," the human said. His voice was deep and calm without any trace of uncertainty. 5,000 credits for the female." Whispers raced through the crowd. 5,000 credits was an absurd price for a barren slave. It was enough to buy 10 healthy breeding females, or a small spacecraft, or a comfortable home on one of the outer colonies. No rational buyer would pay such an amount for damaged goods. But humans, everyone knew, were not rational. They did strange things for strange reasons, following a moral code that no other species could understand. They valued things that had no practical value. They fought wars over ideas rather than resources. They showed mercy to enemies who would have shown them none. The auctioneer looked around the crowd, hoping for a counterbid that would explain this madness. No one raised their hand. No one wanted to compete with a human, especially not a human soldier. The stories about what Earth warriors could do in battle were enough to give anyone nightmares. "Sold," the auctioneer said finally, his voice hollow, "to the human for 5,000 credits." Felt the shackles on her wrists being unlocked. A guard pushed her forward, toward the human who had just purchased her. She stumbled and nearly fell, but the human caught her arm with a gentle grip that surprised her. His touch was warm, and his hands, though calloused from years of hard use, handled her with unexpected care. "Are you injured?" he asked, looking at her with those strange amber eyes. Stared at him, unable to speak. No one had asked about her in years. The question seemed to come from another universe, one where she was a person rather than a piece of property. "I am not injured," she managed to say. The human nodded and released her arm. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a data chip, which he handed to the auctioneer. "The credits have been transferred. The transaction is complete." "Yes, yes, of course," the auctioneer muttered, checking his data pad to confirm the payment. "She's yours now. Do with her as you please." The human did not acknowledge the auctioneer's words. He simply turned and walked toward the exit of the auction house, gesturing for her to follow him. She hesitated for a moment, unsure what to do. Then she followed him, because there was nothing else she could do. Outside, the streets of the capital were crowded with merchants and travelers. The air smelled of exhaust fumes and alien cooking, a familiar mixture that had grown up with. She followed the human through the crowd, struggling to keep up with his long strides. "Where are you taking me?" she asked finally, when they had walked for several minutes in silence. The human stopped and turned to face her. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held no cruelty, no contempt, none of the emotions she had learned to expect from others. "My ship," he said, "we're leaving this planet." "Why did you buy me?" asked, the question bursting out before she could stop it. "I am barren. I have no value. Why would you pay so much for someone like me?" The human studied her for a long moment. Then, to her amazement, he smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it transformed his face into something almost kind. "Among my people," he said, "a person's value is not measured by what they can produce. It is measured by who they are." He paused, as if considering his next words carefully. "I saw you standing in that line, and I saw someone who refused to break, no matter how hard the universe tried to crush her. That kind of strength is worth more than 5,000 credits. It is worth more than all the credits in the galaxy." Did not know what to say. She stood there in the crowded street, looking at this strange creature from a distant world, and felt something stir inside her chest. It was a feeling she barely recognized, one that she had not experienced in years. It was hope. The human extended his hand toward her. "My name is Cole," he said. "I am a sergeant in the Earth Alliance Marines, And if you'll allow me, I'd like to offer you a place on my ship, not as a slave, but as a free person." Looked at his hand, then at his face. She thought about the life she was leaving behind, the years of suffering and humiliation, the endless struggle to survive in a society that considered her worthless. She thought about the uncertain future that lay ahead, the dangers and challenges of traveling with a human into unknown space. Then she took his hand. "My name is," she said, "and I accept your offer." Nodded, and his grip on her hand tightened briefly before he released it. "Welcome aboard. Let's get out of here." They resumed walking through the streets, heading toward the spaceport where his ship was docked. Walked beside him now, not behind him, and she noticed that he adjusted his pace to match hers. It was a small gesture, but it meant more to her than she could express. As they walked, stole glances at the human beside her. She had so many questions, so many things she wanted to understand about this strange being who had appeared in her life like a meteor from the sky. Why had he really bought her? What did he want from her? What kind of place was she going to, and what would her life be like among the humans? But those questions could wait. For now, it was enough to walk beside someone who looked at her and saw a person, not a defective slave. It was enough to breathe air that did not taste of despair. It was enough to feel, for the first time in years, that tomorrow might be better than today. The spaceport appeared ahead of them, its towers reaching toward the purple sky. Somewhere in that maze of landing pads and hangars, a ship was waiting to carry her away from everything she had ever known. Quickened her pace, eager to see what lay beyond the horizon. Behind her, the auction house continued its grim business, selling broken souls to the highest bidder, but did not look back. She had spent too long looking back, mourning what she had lost, grieving for the life that had been stolen from her. Now she looked forward, toward the unknown future, and found that she was not afraid. Whatever came next, she would face it with the strength that Cole had seen in her. She would prove that his faith in her was not misplaced. She would show the universe that a barren female from the Empire was worth more than 50 credits, more than 5,000 credits, more than any amount of money could measure. She was, and her story was just beginning. The ship was called the Iron Horizon, and it was unlike anything it had ever seen. Vessels were elegant and curved, designed to please the eye as much as to travel through space. This human ship was the opposite, all sharp angles and brutal functionality, built for war rather than beauty. Its hull was with the marks of countless battles, patched and repaired so many times that it looked like a patchwork quilt of metal. But despite its rough appearance, the Iron Horizon felt alive in a way that ships never did. There was warmth in its corridors, laughter echoing from the crew quarters, music playing softly in the background. The air smelled of coffee and machine oil and something sweet that could not identify. It smelled like home, or at least like what imagined home should smell like. Led her through the ship, introducing her to the crew members they passed. There were 12 humans aboard the Iron Horizon, each one stranger and more fascinating than the last. There was the pilot, a small woman with quick hands and quicker wit. There was the engineer, a massive man with a beard like a red storm cloud. There was Doctor, the medical officer, whose gentle voice and kind eyes reminded of her grandmother. They all greeted her with warmth and curiosity, shaking her hand in the human fashion and asking her name. None of them looked at her with contempt or pity. None of them asked about her fertility status or her breeding potential. They simply accepted her as a new member of their strange little family. "This will be your quarters," said, stopping in front of a small cabin near the end of the corridor. "It's not much, but it's private and secure. You can lock the door from the inside if you want." Looked at the cabin in amazement. It was tiny by standards, barely large enough for a bed and a small desk. But it was hers. She had not had a space of her own since her family threw her out 10 years ago. The thought of having a room that she could lock, where no one could enter without her permission, brought tears to her eyes. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. nodded, seeming to understand what she was feeling without needing words. "Get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow, once you've had a chance to settle in." He turned to leave but reached out and caught his arm. "Wait," she said. "I need to know something. What do you expect from me? Why are you doing this? I don't understand." Turned back to face her. In the dim light of the corridor, his amber eyes seemed deeper, more complex, holding emotions that could not read. "I expect nothing from you," he said. "I freed you because slavery is wrong, because no person should be bought and sold like cargo. What you do with your freedom is your choice. You can stay on this ship and work with us, or we can drop you off at any port you choose. You owe me nothing." "But the money," protested. 5,000 credits is a fortune. How can you give that away for nothing?" Was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, touched with something that might have been sadness. "Where I come from, we have a saying. The measure of a civilization is how it treats its most vulnerable members. Your people looked at you and saw something broken, something worthless. I looked at you and saw someone who deserved better." He paused, then added, "Besides, money means nothing if you don't use it for something worthwhile. I've earned plenty of credits in my years of service. This seemed like a good way to spend some of them." Did not know how to respond. In the Empire, everything was transactional. Every kindness had a price. Every gift came with strings attached. The idea of giving without expecting anything in return was foreign to her, as strange as the humans themselves. "I will stay," she said finally. "I will work on your ship if you'll have me. I want to learn about your people, about how you see the world." Smiled that small, barely visible smile that she was beginning to recognize. Then, "Welcome to the crew. We're glad to have you." The days that followed were a revelation. Had expected to be given menial tasks, the kind of work she had done all her life: cleaning, scrubbing, carrying heavy loads. Instead, she was assigned to work with Doctor in the medical bay, learning about human medicine and biology. "You have 4 eyes," Doctor explained during one of their first sessions, pointing to a diagram on her data pad. "That means you can see a wider spectrum of light than we can. You might be able to spot things in medical scans that human eyes would miss. Let's find out." She was right. Discovered that she could detect subtle variations in tissue density and blood flow that were invisible to human sight. Within a week, she had identified a hidden tumor in one of the crew members, a growth so small that the ship's scanners had missed it. Doctor removed the tumor in a simple surgery, and the crew member, a young man named Jackson, thanked with tears in his eyes. "You saved my life," he told her. "If that thing had grown any bigger, it would have killed me." Did not know what to say. She had never saved anyone's life before. She had spent so long being told that she was worthless, a burden on society, that the idea of having value was almost impossible to accept. But Jackson's gratitude was real, his tears were real, and slowly began to believe that maybe Cole had been right about her. As the weeks passed, learned more about the humans and their strange culture. She learned that they came from a world of stunning diversity, with thousands of languages and customs and beliefs. She learned that they had spent most of their history fighting each other, but had somehow managed to unite when they reached the stars. She learned that they valued things that they considered foolish: art, music, love, freedom, the right of every individual to determine their own destiny. She also learned about Cole. He was 34 years old, born in a place called Lagos on the continent of Africa. He had joined the Earth Alliance Marines at 18, seeking to escape poverty and find purpose in his life. He had fought in the border wars against the Empire, serving with distinction in battles that had become legendary among his people. He had earned his scars in combat, and he wore them without shame or regret. But there was more to him than his military record. Discovered that he spent his off-duty hours reading books, physical books printed on paper, a luxury that most humans could not afford. He listened to music from 1,000 years ago, songs from a culture called the blues that spoke of suffering and hope and the persistence of the human spirit. He painted, creating images of alien worlds and strange creatures that he had encountered in his travels. And he talked to her, not as a master talks to a slave or as a customer talks to a servant, but as one person talks to another. He asked about her life, her dreams, her fears. He listened without judgment when she told him about her family's rejection, about the years of struggle and humiliation. He never treated her as a victim. He simply listened, and his listening made her feel seen in a way she had never felt before. One night, 3 months after she joined the crew, found sitting alone in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. She sat down beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Can't sleep?" she asked. Shook his head. "Bad dreams. I get them sometimes, memories of the war that won't leave me alone." Nodded. She understood nightmares. She had plenty of her own. "The belief that warriors should not feel fear or regret," she said. "They consider emotional weakness to be a sign of genetic inferiority. A soldier who cannot suppress their feelings is removed from service." "That sounds like a good way to create monsters," said quietly. "Perhaps," agreed. "Or perhaps it simply creates people who are dead inside, who cannot feel anything at all." She paused, gathering her courage. "I think it is braver to feel pain and continue fighting than to feel nothing at all." Turned to look at her, and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. Felt her heart beating faster, felt warmth spreading through her chest. Said, his voice low and serious, "I need to tell you something. When I bought you from that auction, I told you that I expected nothing from you. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth." His breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" "When I saw you standing in that line, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like I was looking at someone who understood what it meant to be alone, to be judged and found wanting by the people who should have loved you." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "I bought you because I couldn't stand to see another person suffer the way I had suffered. But I also bought you because I felt a connection to you. A connection I still don't fully understand." Sat in silence, processing his words. Her whole life, she had been taught that she was unworthy of love, that no male would ever want her because she could not bear children. That belief had become part of her identity, a fundamental truth that she had accepted without question. But was looking at her as if she were precious, as if her inability to reproduce was irrelevant, as if she mattered simply because she existed. It was terrifying and wonderful and completely overwhelming. "Among my people," she said slowly, "a male who chooses a barren female brings shame upon himself and his family. He is considered foolish, weak, defective in judgment. You would be mocked and scorned if you were." "I'm not," said, "and I don't care what your people think. I care what you think. I care how you feel." "How I feel," repeated. The question seemed impossible. No one had ever asked her how she felt. No one had ever suggested that her feelings mattered. She looked at his face and amber eyes, at the kindness and strength that radiated from him like heat from a star. She thought about the past 3 months, about the crew who had accepted her, about the work that gave her purpose, about this strange and wonderful human who had pulled her out of the darkness and into the light. "I feel," she said, her voice trembling, "as if I have been asleep for my entire life and I am only now beginning to wake up. I feel as if the universe is larger and more beautiful than I ever imagined. I feel." She paused, then forced herself to continue. "I feel something for you, Cole, something I never expected to feel, something I was told I would never deserve." Reached out and took her hand. His grip was gentle but firm, and the warmth of his skin against her sent shivers down her spine. "Among humans," he said, "we have a tradition. When 2 people feel what we're feeling, they can choose to be together, to share their lives, to face the universe as partners. We call it many things: marriage, bonding, mating. The words don't matter. What matters is the choice, the commitment to stand beside each other no matter what comes." His eyes widened. "You are asking me to be your mate?" "I'm asking if you would consider it," said. "I know it's sudden. I know you barely know me. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is crazy and complicated. But I also know that life is short and uncertain, and when you find someone who makes you feel complete, you shouldn't let fear stand in your way. Thought about her answer for a long moment. She thought about all the pain she had endured, all the rejection and humiliation. She thought about the future, uncertain and frightening, stretching out before her like an unexplored galaxy. Then she thought about the way he looked at her, about the way he made her feel like she was worth something. "Yes," she said, "I will be your mate, Cole, if you will have me." Smiled, and this time the smile was broad and unrestrained, lighting up his face like a sunrise. "I will have you. I will have you and keep you and stand beside you for as long as we both live." He leaned forward and pressed his lips against hers, and experienced her first kiss. It was soft and warm and impossibly tender, and she felt something inside her break and heal at the same time. Years of loneliness and self-hatred crumbled away, replaced by something new and fragile and precious. When they finally pulled apart, was crying. But for the first time in as long as she could remember, the tears were not from sorrow. They were from joy. The news of their bonding spread through the ship like wildfire. Through a party in the mess hall, decorating the drab metal walls with colorful streamers and playing music that made the humans dance in ways that found both confusing and delightful. Produced a bottle of something called whiskey, which he claimed was older than most civilizations in the galaxy. Doctor made a speech about love conquering all obstacles, which made everyone cry, including Jackson, who had to excuse himself to blow his nose. Had never experienced anything like it. Among the bonding ceremonies were formal and cold, conducted by government officials who recorded the union in the breeding registry. There was no celebration, no joy, just the completion of a legal transaction. But the humans treated her bonding with as a cause for genuine happiness, as if her personal joy somehow increased their own. "This is how humans celebrate," explained, holding her close as the music played. "We believe that happiness shared is happiness. When one of us finds love, we all celebrate, because love is rare and precious and should never be taken for granted." Held onto him tightly, afraid that if she let go, she might wake up and discover that all of this had been a dream, but was real, solid, and warm in her arms, and she knew that whatever happened next, she would never forget this moment. The Iron Horizon continued its journey through the stars, carrying cargo and passengers between the scattered outposts of human space. Settled into her new life with surprising ease, finding a rhythm and purpose that she had never known before. She worked in the medical bay with Doctor, using her unique visual abilities to detect problems that human eyes could not see. She learned to cook human food, mastering the art of something called pasta, which the crew claimed was the greatest culinary achievement in human history. She even learned to play chess, though she suspected that let her win more often than he should have. But happiness, was learning, rarely lasted forever. 6 months after her bonding with, the Iron Horizon received a distress signal from a remote colony on the edge of space. A plague had broken out, killing hundreds and threatening to spread to neighboring systems. The colony was requesting medical assistance from anyone who could reach them in time. Made the decision without hesitation. The Iron Horizon would respond to the distress call, even though it meant entering hostile territory, even though the military might consider their presence an act of war. "We can't just ignore people who need help," he said when some of the crew expressed concerns. "That's not who we are." Felt a cold knot forming in her stomach. The colony in question was located in the Empire, in a sector she knew all too well. It was her home sector, the region where she had grown up, where her family still lived. The thought of returning to that place, of facing the people who had rejected and abandoned her, filled her with dread. But she said nothing. She had made a commitment to and to the crew, and she would not let fear prevent her from doing what was right. The journey took 3 weeks. As the Iron Horizon approached space, found herself growing more anxious with each passing day. She had nightmares about her father, about the coldness in his eyes when he threw her out of the family home. She dreamed about the auction house, about standing in line with the other worthless females, waiting to be sold to the highest bidder. Noticed her distress and tried to comfort her, but some wounds were too deep to be healed with words alone. Could only hope that she would have the strength to face whatever awaited her. The colony was called Five, a mining settlement built on a barren world rich in rare minerals. When the Iron Horizon arrived, they found a scene of devastation. The plague had killed over half the population, and the survivors were weak and desperate, barely able to care for themselves. The government had quarantined the colony, refusing to send aid, apparently willing to let everyone die rather than risk spreading the infection to more valuable populations. Doctor went to work immediately, analyzing samples of the plague and searching for a cure. The disease was unlike anything she had encountered before, a complex bioweapon that seemed almost designed to target physiology. It attacked the reproductive system first, rendering its victims sterile before moving on to destroy other organs. "This isn't natural," Doctor announced after hours of analysis. "This plague was engineered. Someone created it deliberately." The implications were horrifying. Someone had released a bioweapon on a colony, killing innocent people for reasons that no one could understand. The crew of the Iron Horizon worked around the clock, treating the sick and trying to develop a cure. Threw herself into the effort, using her medical training and her knowledge of biology to assist Doctor in every way she could. It was during this crisis that encountered her father. He was among the survivors, one of the few military officers who had been stationed on Five when the plague struck. He was older now, his silver skin faded and his body weakened by disease. When he saw working in the medical tent, his 4 eyes widened in shock. He whispered, "Is that you?" Felt her blood run cold. She had imagined this moment countless times, rehearsed what she would say, how she would respond to the man who had thrown her away like garbage. But now that the moment had arrived, she found herself speechless. "You're alive," her father continued, his voice cracking. I assumed you had died years ago. I never thought I would see you again." "Did you care?" asked, the words bitter on her tongue. "Did you ever think about what happened to me after you threw me out?" Her father flinched as if she had struck him. "I did what I thought was right," he said. "I did what our society demanded. A barren daughter was a shame that I couldn't afford, not with my position, not with my career." "Your career," repeated. "You sacrificed your daughter for your career, and now look at you, dying on a forgotten colony, abandoned by the government you served so faithfully. Was it worth it, Father? Was your precious career worth the price you paid?" Her father had no answer. He simply stared at her with eyes full of regret and sorrow and realized that she felt nothing for him. Not anger, not hate, not even satisfaction at seeing him brought low. Just emptiness, a hollow space where love should have been. She turned away and returned to her work, leaving her father alone with his guilt. The breakthrough came 3 days later. Doctor, working with assistants, developed an antidote to the plague, a treatment that could neutralize the bioweapon and allow the body to heal. They distributed the medicine to everyone in the colony, and within a week, the death rate had dropped to 0. But their troubles were not over. The military had detected the presence of a human ship in their territory, and they were not pleased. A fleet of warships was dispatched to Five, with orders to destroy the Iron Horizon and arrest anyone found aiding the colonists. Received the news with grim determination. "We knew this was a risk when we came here," he told the crew. "We have 2 choices. We can run, or we can stay and face whatever comes. I won't order anyone to stay. This is a decision each of you has to make for yourselves." No one left. Every member of the crew chose to stand with their captain, even knowing that they might be facing death. Felt a surge of pride and love for these strange, brave humans who had become her family. The fleet arrived 2 days later, 12 warships, each one larger and more powerful than the Iron Horizon. They surrounded the colony and demanded the immediate surrender of the human vessel and all its crew members. Transmitted his response on an open channel so that everyone in the system could hear. This is Sergeant Cole of the Earth Alliance Marines. We came to this colony to save lives, not to violate your sovereignty or threaten your people. We have developed a cure for the plague that was killing your citizens, a plague that was deliberately engineered by unknown parties. We are not your enemies. We are here to help. The commander replied with contempt. You are trespassing in our space, human. You have no right to be here, no right to interfere in our affairs. Surrender now or be destroyed. If you destroy us, said calmly, you destroy the only people who can cure the plague. It has already spread to 3 other colonies in this sector. Without our help, thousands more will die. There was silence on the channel. The commander had not known about the spread of the plague, had not realized how many lives were at stake. For a long moment, dared to hope that reason might prevail. Then they opened fire. The battle was short and brutal. The Iron Horizon was, and facing odds that no human ship could overcome. But his crew fought with a ferocity that stunned their opponents, using every trick and tactic they knew to survive against impossible odds. Found herself in the medical bay, treating wounded crew members as the ship shook with each enemy impact. She worked with steady hands and clear focus, refusing to give in to fear, refusing to let her people die without a fight. Then something unexpected happened. The colonists of 5, who had been saved by the human medicine, rose up against their own military. They broadcast messages of support for the Iron Horizon, telling their government about the cure, about the humans who had risked their lives to help them. Other colonies, infected with the spreading plague, added their voices to the chorus. Within hours, the government was facing a crisis of legitimacy. Citizens across the empire were demanding to know why their military was attacking the only people who could save them. The commander of the fleet received new orders. Stand down, allow the humans to leave, accept their cure. The battle was over. Against all odds, the Iron Horizon had survived. When the smoke cleared and the damage was assessed, the crew gathered in the observation deck to watch the fleet withdraw. They were battered and exhausted, many of them wounded, but they were alive. And they had done something that no one thought possible. They had changed hearts and minds in the Empire, shown that there was another way to live, another way to value life. Stood beside his arm around her shoulders, watching the stars spin slowly outside the observation window. She thought about everything she had experienced since that day in the auction house, the fear, the hope, the love, the struggle. She thought about her father, broken and alone, paying the price for his choices. She thought about the colonists, who had seen the truth of human compassion and would never be the same. What happens now? She asked. Smiled that small, quiet smile she had come to love. Now we go home. We get the ship repaired, rest up, and find the next mission. There are always more people who need help, more injustices to fight, more lives to save. And us pressed, what happens to us? Turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. We stay together. We build a life, whatever kind of life we want, and if you're willing, we could even build a family. Felt her breath catch. But I cannot bear children, you know this. There are other ways to build a family, said gently. Adoption, surrogacy, simply choosing to love and care for those who need us. Family isn't about blood or genetics, it's about love, and we have plenty of that. Tears streamed down his face, but she was smiling, smiling so wide that it hurt. She had spent her whole life believing that she was broken, that she could never have a family, that she was destined to be alone forever. But this human, this wonderful, impossible human, had shown her that none of those beliefs were true. She was not broken. She was whole, complete, exactly as she was meant to be, and she was loved. Yes, she said, pulling close. Yes, I am willing. I am willing to build a life with you, to build a family, to face whatever the universe throws at us together. Kissed her then, a deep and passionate kiss that spoke of promises and futures and all the joy that lay ahead. Around them, the crew cheered and applauded, their voices echoing through the ship like a song of celebration. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, a new chapter was beginning. A chapter written not in the cold language of genetics and breeding potential, but in the warm and vibrant language of love. A chapter that would show the galaxy that humans were more than just warriors and traders and explorers. They were the ones who looked at the broken and the forgotten and saw something precious. They were the ones who fought for those who could not fight for themselves. They were the ones who believed that every life had value, every soul deserved dignity, every heart was worthy of love. They were humanity. And standing in the arms of her mate, finally understood why the galaxy feared them. It was not because of their weapons or their technology or their military prowess. It was because of their hearts, because humans had the power to see beauty where others saw only flaws, to find hope where others found only despair, to build love where others built only walls. She had been rejected by her own people, cast aside as worthless and broken. But she had been found by something better, something greater, something that transcended the petty calculations of biology and social status. She had been found by a human. And that had made all the difference. The iron horizon turned toward home, its engines humming with power, its crew united in purpose and love. The stars stretched out before them like a road of light, leading toward a future that was uncertain but bright with possibility. Took one last look at the space she was leaving behind, the empire that had rejected her, the life she had thought was all she deserved. Then she turned away, toward the human standing beside her, toward the family waiting on the ship, toward the love that had transformed her from a slave into something she had never dared to imagine. A woman, a partner, a mate. A person who mattered. And as the ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying her toward her new life, smiled. Her story was just beginning.